Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing fine, and I'm sure you stayed up and listened carefully because we're going to give you a couple quizzes here pretty soon. Well, I stayed up too, and I listened to it, sort of. No, I did. I tried to, but it was at times pretty painful for me to do that. But evidently it was painful for others. Nobody's right and say, wasn't that a wonderful debate? We learned a lot, and he helped me make up my mind. You don't hear much of that. But there was one article, I'm going to read a little quote from Case University, because they're worried about the children. The children, oh no, the kids, the students, you know, at the school, that they might get upset with this. And I think they should be upset. Yeah. I think they should be really upset about what's going on and coronaviruses and everything else. But they're upset because the school wants to make sure there's nobody's emotionally stressed out over this. And so they've set this is a known function. If you're under stress, you have these areas where you go and you get unstressed, and you have
safe space,
and you have counselors coming to help you out. So that's what they needed here. Western Reserve University, the site of last night's presidential, has set up dedicated support spaces for students who have been triggered by the tense exchanges. Well, there were some, but I'm not quite sure. I would think the philosophy that has these support stations might be part of the problems that creates the stress. But the university, this is really, because this is medical now, this is down my alley. The university announced that the support space is not a substitute for psychotherapy and does not constitute mental health treatment. You should be feeling good about the fact that your taxpayers' money are being spent wisely to take care of the mental health of the kids. But are they worrying about the mental health of the kids they're sending, no matter how old they are, with face masks to school and really causing anxiety? But anyway, we can rest assured that they are checking on the kids, and we don't want them to be stressed because they're going to be stressed, though, when they find out what the non-political system has and what's in store for them if we ever have a sorting out of all the mess that we have, and that the debates don't seem to resolve much of that. You know, so what did you gain from this little?
Well, I'm just reacting to that. You know, we don't support the draft, but sometimes when I see something like that, I really start to reconsider our view on the draft, because if these guys are running off to a safe space because two candidates are yelling at each other, some part of me would like to see them put on this equipment and here's a gun and go, you know, I mean, it's just, but you know, after we watched the debate, I watched it with my kids, and after we watched it, it was so bad, it was in terms of just the decorum, that I went back and I looked at some previous debates. I looked at the first Carter Ford debate in 1976, and I even looked at the 1980 debate with Reagan. And, you know, the difference is just so unbelievable, the way they spoke, the way they carried themselves, you know, and it's just, that world is gone. But anyway, you know, the first thing I thought is I got up this morning, I was looking at some of the reactions, and I remembered something you said yesterday, which is keep an eye on the futures market. That will tell you what the prevailing wisdom is about the debate and who won. So you looked at it this morning, I'm sure. What did you come up with?
Yeah, well, last night they were up, and they're really up now, and it seems like everybody in the marketplace seems like things will be pretty good. And the first thought came to mind for me was that if they're up, it means that Trump did better than most of the pundits on TV, because they're all saying, you know, Biden won, Biden won. And yet the markets are doing extremely well. But then I got to thinking, well, there is a lot of momentum going in one direction. So it hasn't changed it. The money is out there, the printing presses are there, it's a bipartisan thing to bail out everybody. So they had this momentum, and it's almost delusional, no matter how bad things are, with common sense on what's happening in the economy and the potential consequence of all the monetary inflation. But it's almost opposite of what they do with the concerns about the virus. Here I see what happens with the debates is they're delusional. They've deluded, oh, it's pretty neat. We're drunk on the money and we don't have to do anything, and maybe we don't know. It's harder to make these guesses now with the confusion of the markets, but now it was conceded that things aren't going to be too bad, and maybe Trump is going to still be in there. But on the viruses, instead of having this artificial boosting and the delusion, we have hysteria.
Yeah.
The fear that is built, and then that's an overreaction, a hysterical reaction of how bad things are. So it's. I don't know whether a society can get schizophrenic, but in a way, it's schizophrenic. It's on again, off again. But I think I'm not surprised, because I've been concerned or trying to analyze this for a long time, and that is there's something basically and seriously wrong with our society. And that's when, a few months ago, I did that little essay on the bankruptcy, and talked most to my political career, the financial bankruptcy and the spending, and that's much wilder than I ever dreamed. And that is, I combined it with the whole idea which the founders suggested, that we have to be careful or we'll lose everything if you end up with a moral bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And when you look at this stuff that's going on and looking, and you made a real good point on this, just even though there's been political parties for a long time, and they were back there, and now all of a sudden, there's quite difference. I mean, what are the odds of next week these two guys getting together and shake hands?
Yeah, no, you can't do that.
I was always wondering whether they'd be wearing masks, but there were some people in the audience. And the other thing I noticed about it, which is so boring, because the debates to me were challenging and exciting, but we ended up with supporters there. I don't know how we got them in, but they got in. But last night when they came on the stage, they were already frowning at each other. And then the only time they were told they were allowed to react and applaud was when they came on. And there was nobody there.
Yeah.
It's sort of like going to the baseball game and hearing the cheers for somebody hitting a home run.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're doing it to ourselves. That's what's so sad.
Yeah, it was pretty empty, in many different ways. The thing overall, I would guess, I tuned in probably like most of America, expecting to see like an early Muhammad Ali or an early Mike Tyson just knocking someone out. The expectations for Biden, we've all seen his gaffes, we've all seen his appears to be confusing. Maybe he's doing it on purpose to lower expectations, but I think he did better than expected. I think he held his train of thought, and he gave back as well as he received for the most part. But when you dive into it a little bit more, there were a few things that stood out. And the first one was interesting. Biden is trying to walk back from a lot of his own positions, but he doesn't realize that you can fact check people. He rejected the idea that he's in favor of the Green New Deal. He doesn't like it. Well, in fact, it's on his own website that he supports it, and his own running mate is a co-sponsor of the bill. So he was knocked on that, I think, pretty hard. Well, the other thing that struck me, and this is something that if Trump develops further could pay off for him, is that Biden has firmly established himself as the lockdown candidate. He says, I will lock down the country. You got to defeat this virus. We can't do anything until the virus is gone. It's almost as if he thinks it's a war. But here's how Trump hit back at him, and I think it could be successful. He wants to shut down the country. I want to keep it open. And if that's a theme, I think that could be a winning theme.
Trump did as well as he could under the circumstances, leaning in our position. But I thought he could have been a little bit stronger about the fake data that they have to deal with. This whole thing about cases and infections and the things that everything is based on that. Of course, he's in the middle of it. At one time he was putting up with and praising Fauci. So and now, of course, we have some help there. But But it's easy to do the Monday morning quarterback, believe me. I often think back at some of the things that people were generous with me. They would say, well, that's good, he has good answers on. But most of the time I walked away. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I say that? You can always think of a better answer. But I think that's the way the system works. But I think even on this economy, the euphoria that's there today is almost. It's bipartisan.
Yeah.
Even though the fighting is going on, it seems like the markets are moving in a direction. Now, I was sitting there looking at it from an economic viewpoint and what's happening with the growth of government, and I thought the evidence was there. If I were to react, which I have already reacted in that direction, I'd get out of the market. There's a crash coming, and we're going to have a lot of inflation, and the suffering has only begun, and has very little to do with coronavirus. It has to do with the group of people they didn't talk about last night, and that's the deep state, the power of the deep state controlling foreign policy and controlling monetary policy and all the spending. And the big deal right now when it comes to real politics is there is no belief that there won't be more stimulus. Well, you're living on a stimulus, and that's what's going to continue. I saw no change in attitude about that last night.
Yeah, that wasn't even part of the debate, as far as I can see. I think Trump was pretty weak when he was talking about his response to COVID-19, he defended a lot of the things, at least from our perspective, that were pretty dumb, shutting down, all of these things. And no, I was tough, I shut it down. What he should have said, I think, is we didn't know very much when we started. I did what I thought was best at the beginning, but now I'm talking to different advisors. I'm talking to people who are, gaining knowledge and experience about this and what it takes to defeat it and looking at other places, and we're transitioning to a new approach. You're stuck in the old approach, Joe. Speaking of that, the funny thing, too, I wrote down some quotes that were funny. Here's Biden to Trump. Biden, he tells Trump, get out of your bunker. Get out of the sand trap. Get out of your golf course. He's the one that's been living in a basement for the last 6 months, not even getting out. So I thought that was pretty funny. The other zinger, I think, was when Biden said, well, Antifa is an idea, not an organization. And Trump said, you got to be kidding me. He said, when you get hit on your head with a bat, it's not an idea.
Right. So. And then that's when Trump made the point, there was a lot of violence in the streets, and that, of course, it was a partisan issue with him. The Democrats are responsible for it. And he mentioned it, but I didn't think it was strong enough that, let me list 6 cities or 8 cities, maybe 10 cities. And everybody would recognize the name because they're in squalor. They're living in the streets and they're burning cities down. And say every one of them is run by the Democratic Party. Everyone has a Democratic mayor, and there is a Democratic governor. And I don't know if Biden can come back with a Republican state, Republican city where things got really, really bad. There has to be some because of other issues, but there's an overwhelming amount of evidence to show that this is a partisan thing. In Democrat-run cities, people are leaving quickly.
Yeah, that is a good point. I think we would have had a hard time, not that we're interested necessarily in the partisan aspect, but he could have made that point very clearly. I think the other thing that was interesting is that Biden refused to disavow the suggestions that he would oversee the end of the filibuster in the Senate, that he would pack the Supreme Court, and that he would add Puerto Rico and D.C. as U.S. states, which would add 4 more Democratic senators probably permanently. And Trump tried to pin him down on this, deny this. And then again, Chris Wallace stepped in and shut down, as he did several times last night.
Well, I think Biden should be pressed on it, and Trump was getting close to it. How do you stack a Supreme Court? It's been tried before. Interestingly enough, it went to the Supreme Court and it was ruled illegal. You couldn't do it. And that's a precedent. But they keep saying, if they're in charge, they can do anything they want. And that's back to the old belief, and it's still around, is that they can do anything they want. It's not prohibited, in the Constitution. And that's the difference between, one of the major differences between between a constitutionalist and non-constitutionalist is the liberal who wants more government said, you can do anything you want if you have the votes, or if you don't have the votes, unless it was prohibited by the Constitution. And that's wrong. Everything is prohibited except here's our list, Article 1, Section 8. They give you a list of what they're allowed to do. But they still just go over that, and there won't be many in the media will ask you, you talk about packing the courts. How do you do that?
Yeah.
And then the filibuster. How do you get rid of the filibuster? That's been every election I remember. Right afterwards, somebody was unhappy with the Electoral College. We got to get rid of the Electoral College until you find out. Oh, you mean Wyoming has as many votes about that than New York State? And they say, yeah, that's why it's unfair. We have to get rid of it. No, that's the way the founders wanted it, to make it difficult for one state to run the whole country.
Yeah, to protect Wyoming and places like it. The thing that I thought, maybe it's just because I'm focused on this, that I thought the most fascinating moment was when the discussion, I use that term very loosely, veered toward the transition. And Biden started out by talking about what a smooth transition it was, when in 2016 when you took over. And Trump hit something that I'm wondering now might be an October surprise. Here's what Trump said. There was no transition because they came after me trying to do a coup. They came after me spying on my campaign. They started from the day I won and even before I won. From the day I came down the escalator with our First Lady. They were a disaster. They were a disgrace to our country. And this is the part. And we've caught them. We've caught them all. We've got it all on tape. We've caught them all. And that Biden looked a little bit nervous when Trump was saying that.
Well, and I think the evidence is there. I never studied it as an expert legalist and look into every one of these. But I think I, like many others, have come to the conclusion that that's exactly what they were doing. I always thought, how they controlled the FBI and the Justice Department. They were trying to frame him. It was a frame-up. They were twisting around and the information. Anything they did wrong, they twisted wrong and said, you did it, when it came to Russiagate. So what I think you're pointing out is maybe they're about to hear the hard evidence. Maybe it'll be a lot more explainable than what I've just said, and just said, I have an instinct, and just from the information I know, it looks like he was being framed, and in a way, if that is true, and I believe it's true, you really have to sympathize and wish him well in exposing the truth, especially even if it's going to or will help sort it out and help Trump.
Even a president who you don't agree with when you look at what happened. But this is why it's also interesting is this explosive letter that the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, sent to Lindsey Graham, who occasionally does something smart, sent yesterday. This is a letter he sent to Senator Graham. In response to your request for intelligence community information related to the FBI Crossfire Hurricane investigation, I have declassified the following. And there are 3 very important paragraphs. I'll just read the middle one because this is from the intelligence community. According to his handwritten notes, former Central Intelligence Agency Director Brennan subsequently briefed President Obama and other senior national security officials on the intelligence, including the, quote, alleged approval by Hillary Clinton on July 26, 2016, of a proposal from one of her foreign policy advisors to vilify Donald Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming interference by Russian security services, end quote. They have the note that Brennan, at the time CIA director, had showing that Hillary Clinton approved this entire thing.
Do you think they're getting close to dirty politics and something very illegal?
It certainly sounds like it, It certainly does, and it's you have to resist the political angle of it but this is what, from the very beginning when we were talking about Russiagate, this is what we thought it was. They're projecting onto Trump what they themselves are doing.
Yeah.
It's pretty heavy duty.
It's amazing how far along that got, but if you look at all the major networks and look at what they've said over these last 3 years or 4 years, I mean, it's been so biased and so slanted that it's a wonder that if anybody can, even give Trump a fair shot at it. But Trump is somebody that, is a fighter, but sometimes he's fighting with himself. and other than that, but you do need somebody that's not going to be easily rolled on it and just walk away from it.
So if you, like me, were expecting a boxing match, how would you rate this boxing match? How would you call it after the fact?
Oh boy, I think that it's a good analogy, the boxing match. I probably like some other people. It depends on what issue. I don't think anybody came out way ahead. But if I look at the consequences of the markets and everything, I don't think Trump has been set back as much as they would like him to think, because I think Trump probably held his own, and I don't think this is enough for them to say that, Trump doesn't have a prayer, boy, with this, because Biden looks so much better than anybody anticipated. So it's probably a close match, but I think Trump did not get set back. But
yeah.
Who am I to say?
Yeah, no, and I think he did well probably with African American voters. He had some zingers in there as well. Do you want to transition a little bit to a couple of COVID
there you
things?
Go. Yeah, that's right.
Let's put on this next clip. This is from the CDC, so they can't complain that we're not following the CDC. Let's go to the next clip if we can. This is something the CDC put out yesterday, another scare warning. New CDC info shows COVID-19 infections among 18 to 22-year-olds has increased more than 50% from early August to early September. Everyone needs to help slow the spread of COVID-19. Wear a mask, stay 6 feet apart, wash your hands, and stay home. Look at the next one, though. This is with one of the commenters who's quite astute at this, Jordan Schachtel. And he makes a good point. Insane falsehood and dumb fear-mongering. This, i.e. the increase, is because college students are forced to undergo frequent testing, which adds to the case-demic. Nothing more. Redfield is the lead clown, the clown show that is the CDC. So the CDC comes out with this scare info. Young people are college age or more and more. That's because every time they go, they're tested over and over, and each one is a new case. So that's what's building it.
And I understand there's companies that make money over the more the testing, the more money they make, And that is leading up to the next big challenge that the American people will have to face, is what will the consequence be on our liberties when it gets to the point where either you prove that you are clean and you have the immunity, which is going to be very, very difficult because that's a variable, or how are you going to prove whether or not you're immune, you've taken the vaccination, you've had your immunity. And to think that, once again, you are under our control unless you do what we tell you. You're not automatically free person, and unless there's a reason, you lose any of your liberties. You've lost them until you regain them. You regain them by crawling.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what that stuff is. Those masks, and then make the kids crawl.
Yeah.
And I get more stories told to me about what's going on in the schools and how horrible it is. So they have it backwards. There's nothing natural about liberty for us in this country anymore. So once you do that, which has been incremental, but it's been solidified now, that it's really, unless you address that, you're always going to be proving that you have earned your liberty.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I did it. I did exactly as they said. I paid my taxes. They got 85% of my money out of that. So once they make you do that, you don't live in a free country anymore. Why? You're so unpatriotic. You're un-American. But I don't feel badly about pointing out the shortcomings of what's going on and why we don't live in a free country as it was once intended.
Yes. And I want to follow up with something we talked about yesterday, very, very briefly. We talked about New York and New York City and what a disaster Cuomo and de Blasio have made. They bankrupted the state. They bankrupted the city. You cannot get a U-Haul because people are lining up for miles. They want to move out. Let's look at this next clip. This was Cuomo's response. He's not accepting liability for the economic losses from COVID. Here's what he said. He's the one that shut his state down. The federal government's liable. They're going to pay that bill, not us. How is New York City, New York State going to solve the deficit? We're not. It's Donald Trump's deficit. Well, good luck with that, Governor Cuomo, right?
And also, that's a tough deal for the president. The enemy, are also claiming that he's responsible for the people. And Biden, I think,
yeah, every single one who died is his fault.
You caused all these deaths. I think that's over the top. I think that might end up, when this sinks in, that some of this stuff is over the top. And it's so outlandish that some people might not take it on and say, I'm worn out. I can't keep reiterating how stupid they are and how evil they are. But they just might well walk out and say, I've had enough of this. I want our policemen on the block to take care of us. We don't need our cities burning down.
Yeah.
And I don't think the violence in the city was mentioned enough and talked about enough, because that is the image that is going to convert a lot of people. Their cities burning down. And I think it's real interesting when you see a black family in a black community just begging and pleading, the police come and the firemen come, defunding the police. I mean, they'd stand there and say, this is where I go shopping, this is where I live, this is where my kid works, and this is where I go to school. What are you doing this to us for? Yeah. And it isn't the white people. They say, oh yeah, this is a white superiority, right? It's white supremacy. That's why you're putting up with this. So you have to join the revolution and cause more trouble. Sad story.
It is. Well, speaking of stupid and evil, here's my last comment, and it's really not very nice to say, but it does fit in this respect. Let's talk about Houston and people like Lena Hidalgo, the county judge, who says we actually have to keep Houston locked down even tighter. We don't dare give an inch. Well, let's look at my final picture here. These are the latest metrics from the Texas Medical Center. These are the hospitals in Houston. Look where every single one of the gauges are. This is the effective reproduction rate on the left. Daily new cases in the middle, test positivity rate on the right, low, all in the green. This is what Dr. Chris Summers says, the lowest metric seen in Houston since the medical center started tracking COVID-19. Yet the cases still haven't gone below the magic 200 number, and even if it does, it must stay there for 14 days to be worthy of being safe. So the numbers from the hospitals, all in the green. Hidalgo says, nope, stay home, mask up, wash your hands, don't go to work.
And of course, you can get verification of this from the doctors, and many of them will come out and state it, the ones that work there. So it's a lot of distortion of the truth. No doubt they depend on the lying in order for them to enhance their goal of total control of the people. And that is why I'm interested in keeping people thinking about this when it comes to masks or whatever, that what they're looking for is submission. And submission, to me, is very, very dangerous. It goes along with where they think their rights come from. And if we can get them to submit, then that will be the important thing. But we search and search, and some days we have more positives than others. But I'm still there hoping and praying that things will straighten out. But there are times when there's so much terrible things to point out. And, watching for an hour or so, or more than an hour last night, it wasn't very encouraging. So I just said, I sort of had a daydream last night. I thought, well, wouldn't it be neat if, even if it was just symbolism, that two individuals and just sit down at the table pretending they're two candidates for the presidency and having an adult discussion on the things they honestly disagree on, and have the disagreement, but do it in a format that people might say, hey, this is very serious. But then again, people say, oh no, I like the excitement, but I think the excitement and this yelling and screaming and vulgarity is out of control. And that's why maybe a boring, old-fashioned, honest debate on issues might be what we're really in need of. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.